Titans, go!
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Titan Talk, the Titans podcast, aka the Doom Patrol podcast. I'm Charles Skaggs, back in Doom Manor, ready to talk some Doom Patrol with my favorite co-host, everybody's favorite co-host, Jesse Jackson. Hi, Jesse.
Hello, Charles.
How you doing?
Are you ready to go to the underground?
I am definitely ready to go to the underground. I was ready to, last week to go to the underground. I was born ready. So, how about, I hope this is one that you're enthused about talking about, because and I am really enthused about this one.
I continue to just be more and more impressed with this series.
Excellent. That's a good hint there.
Yeah, I really do think that they're treating this first season as a long scale pilot, almost introduction to the world.
Okay.
Versus the instead of looking for the chief, this is truly, we're going to just spend time with these people so we'll get to know them so that we can just go further next season. So yeah, right. Good stuff.
Yeah, this is obviously a big Crazy Jane episode and also a big Cliff episode.
Yes.
And so obviously they're going to feature throughout the episode because that's pretty much this episode is. It's a Cliff and Crazy Jane spotlight episode.
Absolutely.
And with the other Doom Patrol members kind of appearing as a cameo, they're not really that important to this one. So this was a really interesting one to break down, which we'll cover about. But I came up with a little breakdown and actually have a theme this week I want to talk about.
Right.
So we can do that. So in general, before we get into our discussion, what did you think of this story?
I really liked it a lot. It's a great series when you say, ooh, these two are my favorite characters. And then when you go to a different episode that's about other characters, you go, ooh, these are my favorite characters. But right now, after this episode, Cliff and Jane are my two favorite characters. And to have an episode dedicated just to them is just very, very cool.
That is very cool. And this is obviously one that I've been enthused about talking about because it was based on one of my favorite issues, if not my favorite issue of Doom Patrol ever, a story called Going Underground by Grant Morrison and Richard Case that debuted in Doom Patrol Volume 2, number 30, way back in 1990. So the story, this concept, is essentially looking like close to now 30 years old, if you can believe it. But it obviously resonates today, and I thought this was a really good adaptation of that.
Yeah, so not to get us off track, and you can, if you, as they say in business world, let's table that if need be, depending on your topics. But because I have seen other stories about this kind of background and the abuse, early childhood abuse leading to problems down the road. So it wasn't a shock to me. I knew this was coming the whole time. But was this, when you originally read that, was that a little more shocking? Were you surprised, or you just kind of he targeted what he was going to do and then just nailed it on the execution?
Well, I think when I was reading the comic back in the 90s, there was that Morrison, I'm talking about Grant Morrison here.
Yes, absolutely.
He kind of hinted at certain topics. You knew that Jane was damaged, but
right.
Morrison up until this point hadn't really laid everything out. He kind of hinted here, he kind of hinted there.
Mm-hmm.
But this issue number 30, essentially just laid all the cards on the table and confirmed your worst fears about what happened to Jane.
Yeah.
And so you kind of, it's not a surprise, but you're still troubled to have your worst fears realized, I think.
Yeah.
At least I was, anyway.
Okay. Good.
Obviously being a comic book, it's much more visual and a little bit more surreal, but the core elements of this story are there, and I thought I was very reassured by that. I was hoping that once I knew for sure that they were going to adapt that story, I was a little nervous, but based off of what we've seen so far, I was hopeful that they would pull it off, and I thought they did. Especially
I did too.
Especially Diane Guerrero, who
yes.
This is her big spotlight episode, and she did a phenomenal job in this one.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so this episode, Jane Patrol, that we're going to talk about here today, Doom Patrol episode 9 of season 1. As we get ever closer, we're close to the 2/3 mark here in season 1. Written by Marcus Dalzine, who co-wrote the previous story, Cult Patrol, which was also based on a Grant Morrison storyline. So he seems to be one of the writers very familiar with Morrison. And so I was kind of glad that he was given this task for this episode. Directed by a new director, Harry Jirgian, whose work I'm not familiar with, but thought he did a decent job here. Let's see, guest cast this week. Obviously, we had a lot of guest cast because we get to see a lot of Jane's personalities from inside her mind. So just like in the comics, they don't all look like Jane.
And I thought that obviously since I had read the comic,
right?
Were you surprised by that? No, I liked that. I thought that was realistic in as much as it can be realistic, but I thought it was a good theory that yes, some of them do, but most of them don't, and it made for a great visual of all these different. And I loved how they, highlighted the person's name.
Well, they kind of keep it straight for everybody.
Yeah, and that was really well done.
Yeah, and I think you almost had to because there were so many personalities, and you didn't want to get them confused. And it kind of helped. Like you had seen Jane act as a lot of these personalities, but it kind of like gave you that connection as far as how Jane views them inside her head, which I thought was important.
Yeah, I agree, and I liked. We've seen like Hammerhead.
Yes.
We have seen. When Hammerhead appears, we get that tattoo that's across the chest.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, and so then on Hammerhead's persona in Jane's head, there's the tattoo. Same thing with the silver tongue.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that little bit of silver paint around her chin area.
Yeah. So I just thought this was awesome.
Mouth and chin area. Yeah, the goatee area. But I bet Diane Guerrero is happy that she doesn't have to wear a bald cap as Hammerhead during those scenes, because now that they've revealed that Hammerhead is bald in her persona, all she has to do is the tattoo. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and
she doesn't have Stephanie Czajkowski's bald head, as apparently she does in real life.
Yeah, and I liked that not all the it appears to me at least not all the personas were female, though most of them are.
Right.
And it was nice to the personas we got to spend time with were really interesting, and I'm looking forward to talking about some of them to you.
Yeah. So as far as the guest cast, Anna Lore, who played Penny Farthing, takes a very predominant role in this one. Like I said, Stephanie excuse me, Czajkowski, I think is how it's pronounced, Czajkowski. She plays Hammerhead. She's been on episodes of Supergirl, where she played a security guard, Bones, and Jane the Virgin.
Okay.
We got Sky Roberts, who played young Kay Chalice. Once again, Dave McDonald as the ultra creepy daddy in the story. Got to see him again.
Mm-hmm.
Tara Lee, who played Lucy Fugue, the one with the electrical powers. She's been in episodes of Sleepy Hollow, Ozark, and The Fall with Gillian Anderson, if you remember that series recently. Let's see. Chelsea Rivera played Silvertongue. Hannah Aline played Pretty Polly. And she's been in episodes of The Resident and 24 Legacy. Jackie Goldston was the secretary. She's been in episodes of The Passage, the vampire series that's on Fox recently.
Mm-hmm.
Shay Mack played Driller Bill, the kind of the secondary personality that kind of helps escort Cliff to jail. She was in episodes of Sleepy Hollow and Ozark. So Sleepy Hollow getting a lot of reference in Doom Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
Actress named Monica Lawrence did The Three Sisters, and she was in episodes of Heroes and The Vampire Diaries. Leela Owen played young Miranda. Helen Abel as Black Annis, another personality I was very excited to finally see on the series. She's been in episodes of Stranger Things and Orange is the New Black, which also, if you remember, features Diane Guerrero. We get the return of Tyler Buckingham as Frank, who was in the Paw Patrol series. And, so that during that flashback scene. So that's probably where you're getting confused that there were male personalities. Yeah. Those weren't personalities. That was a memory.
Okay, but I do think I think they're all female.
They're all female because remember they make a big deal that no men are allowed.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I also saw I recognize Flick, right? That's the teleporting.
Right.
Yeah, that was very cool. So nice.
And Bethany Katsoulis did a quick cameo as Jack Straw, the one in the kind of scarecrow-looking personality in the cell alongside Cliff, the one that slips Cliff the pick to break through the wall. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I just thought I'd mention all those. So if you're kind of wondering who played what, that's who it is.
Okay.
Now, before we get into our main discussion, I want to mention I talked about the comic book, but I did want to kind of mention a few differences from the comic, if you're interested.
Sure.
All right. So quick differences include Jane being catatonic. When Jane's catatonic at the beginning of the episode. In the comic, she had previously faced a character known as the Fifth Horseman during the Brotherhood of Dada, the first appearance of Mr. Nobody in the comic. And so, obviously, different reasons why she ends up being catatonic on the show. And in the comic, the Chief is the one who disconnects Cliff's brain from his body and puts him in just a floating nutrient tank just before Rebus, a kind of version of Negative Man, acts as that psychic conduit to put Cliff's mind into Jane's mind.
Okay.
So it's a little different there. And then when Cliff first enters the underground, he doesn't just wake up on the train tracks. In the comics, he kind of falls from far above into essentially what we see is this kind of map of the underground. Kind of like if you've seen the British underground, they have a map of the various stations. Well, Cliff kind of falls into that, kind of like something out of Tron or something, where he's kind of falling and lands in that world. And so it's much more visual, but obviously they probably, because of the limited budget, had to kind of scale that idea back.
Sure.
And when he arrives, he's still in his robot body, not as Cliff Steele, a human, but it kind of makes more sense that Cliff would kind of view himself as a normal man in Jane's mind. So that kind of makes sense.
Which made for a very powerful self-realization when he I'm not a man, and embrace the fact that he was a robot.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that.
Good.
And the one last difference is that Driver 8 is the personality that takes Cliff around through the underground in the comic, as opposed to Penny Farthing. So I thought that was an interesting twist.
I was glad because Penny Farthing we've already spent some time with her.
Exactly.
It made a lot of sense. I really liked Driver 8 though.
Yeah, that's who we want to talk about first.
Okay.
So I thought, since this is all a big Cliff and Jane episode, as we get into our main topics, I thought it would be good to kind of break it down by the personalities that interact with them.
Okay.
So the major ones. And so my first topic this week, and there is a theme, like I said.
Okay.
And the train conductor says, take a break, Driver 8. So that's a lyric from a song called Driver 8, I will mention, which is the song that Grant Morrison named the character after.
So
I'll leave that there for now. And so obviously I want to talk about Driver 8 in this segment, along with Cliff and Jane. And I also want to talk about Karen in this segment, because those are kind of like the first two major personalities that Cliff meets while in the underground. So Driver 8 is one of the main personalities I've been dying to meet. We haven't gotten her until now. And we don't really see her in the comic until this story, so which makes perfect sense. So I was very excited by this. So Jesse, what's your thoughts about the Driver 8 personality, and also more of Karen, kind of picking up from the events of last week? What did you think of that? And we'll also talk about Cliff entering the underground and whatnot.
Yeah, the first thing I thought is wasn't there there was a character, and I can't remember which comic, where they called them like Crazy 8 or something, but it was supposed to be the infinity sign. You know, and so this reminded me of that, because it is
8 turns sideways is
the infinity sign
symbol. Yes.
And so I thought it was very interesting that Driver 8 does have it sideways, so it's and
that's
infinity.
as it is in the comic too.
Yeah.
So
I like that a lot.
Right. So what do you think? Because this is the kind of the full depiction of the underground.
Yeah.
So we do kind of see it as a train network. Mm-hmm. And I know you haven't been to Britain. I have. Mm-hmm. So I've been on the London Underground, and so obviously Morrison, being a Scottish writer, is very familiar with the London Underground. Yeah. And what did you think of this depiction of what's inside Jane's head? Did it help kind of give you a good setting for the way, with the idea that each of the personalities have stations, and they get kind of transported up either to the surface or back down or whatnot, and Driver 8 is the one personality that is responsible for that?
No, see, that wasn't made very clear to me by the episode at all.
Okay.
I saw it more as this massive, just depository of where everyone, this huge train station. So yeah. I did not think of them each having their own station. I think of them all crowded at Grand Central Station is what it came across to me.
Okay.
And just as they needed, they joined the train. I thought that was a really interesting thing, mm-hmm. and the idea that Driver's happy.
Right.
I really like the idea of Jane looking at the emergency brake and going, I wonder what would happen. Mm-hmm. And I would have to fix it. Well, how long? How long would you need me to fix it? Was a really cool point that it was good to see.
So it was kind of like Driver 8, that Driver 8 was willing to work with Jane to give her more time for what she needed.
Yeah, like it was good to see that some of the personas are actually not anti Jane. They actually work together at times.
Right.
While others, you seem that it is a friction relationship all the time.
Right.
The librarian, or no, the secretary.
The secretary.
Yeah, the whole idea that she wants order, and
Right.
if we don't do this, things are going to be happen.
Right.
So yeah, I like the idea of the train. The train was pretty run down. It wasn't bright or pretty.
No, it's not. It's not a bright and sunny place inside Jane's head.
No,
and that's makes perfect sense given her trauma and all the problems that she has. It's not going to be this bright sunny place.
Yeah, and a lot of graffiti, a lot of just this is not a very well maintained, and that makes sense. Her brain, the underground, is not very well,
and it's obviously a little bit creepy, and which it's not a comfortable place. It's it's a dangerous place.
I agree.
And so when we're kind of introduced to kind of like right off the bat, we're kind of introduced to a bunch of personalities as Karen is dragged back down into the underground by Hammerhead.
Yes.
And they have a little confrontation. Karen is essentially talking about how, well, at least I have had love, Karen's very confrontational, especially with Pretty Polly, who she like spits in her face and taunts her by singing. And, she's essentially that we get this kind of right off the bat, we see the conflict going on inside Jane's mind among the various personalities, how they're all kind of battling for a little bit of control, or at least, they because certain people clash with other people. Jane has that going on inside her head all the time.
Yeah.
And it's obviously very uncomfortable. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the personalities, once Jane kind of steps out of the shadows as she's watching all this, they're saying, look, we need you up there. We need you to kind of keep things in order, like you talked about with the secretary, and Lucy Few kind of points this out, that they feel that they need that primary personality.
Yes.
Steering the bus, essentially, steering Jane, in control of Jane. And without it, there's just all this the equilibrium is off, and that kind of Lucy Few points out that it makes all of them more vulnerable. So Jane says she agrees to go up, but then when she starts going up, she kind of rethinks it, and that's when she kind of works with Driver 8 to kind of give herself more time, because Jane is not eager about going up. Jane feels that Jane's kind of fed up right now. She's talking about how she's worried that she can't trust anybody, and she doesn't know who to trust.
Yeah, he was she's really going through a lot, and she just doesn't want to be there.
No.
She just wants to lay in the dark.
She wants a timeout, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
She's looking to escape for a while. She doesn't want to be responsible for all the other personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was rather interesting. And in Driver 8, once Cliff shows up, Driver 8 essentially, and again, this is a stark contrast from the comics, because in the comics, Driver 8 is very helpful to Cliff. Very wants nothing more to kind of knows that Jane needs Cliff.
Yeah.
And so she's very helpful to him in the comic. Here she's not. She tells him, hey, this is off limits. You're not supposed to be here. And Cliff's just trying to figure this whole thing out, because he's now in her mind. He now looks like his normal self. And he's trying to get a handle on where he is and what's going on, because it's Cliff. He's always asking what's going on.
So Cliff is not the brightest bulb.
Right. Well, he's a race car driver. He's not a
yeah,
scientist. So,
sharpest knife in the drawer, and that's
yes.
been. But I do think he's trying to have a good heart. He is trying to be a better person because he knows he was not a very good person when he was a human.
Right.
So yeah.
And he starts off feeling that he's he feels like he's responsible for Jane's current condition because of when Admiral Whiskers was tinkering around inside his head.
Mm-hmm.
He's blaming himself. He's like, this is all my fault. I shouldn't have pushed the therapy. And then Rita's like going, well, no, that was actually the rat that pushed the therapy.
And it was a great scene where he finally says that to Jane, and Jane's like, "Oh, I've been wanting that. No, I haven't." That was great.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Get over yourself.
It's almost more like Cliff, he's trying to apologize to make himself feel better, not because he wants Jane to feel better. And maybe that, or at least that's how Jane views it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I thought that was rather interesting. But Driver 8 essentially tricks Cliff, kind of like leads him to think that she's helping him, when in fact she calls Hammerhead and Driller Bill to kind of usher him off to the jail cells, and then gives him, flips him the bird as he goes. And poor Cliff ends up in a slammer with Karen, and who's also there having a timeout, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so what did you make of that scene? Those two in the cell.
So Karen is not, when they talked about it last time,
right?
Karen is delusional.
Yes.
She just, me and, I found true love.
She lives in a fantasy world.
And not even,
and she's like the others, they don't know what it's like. They don't know.
Yeah.
Like they're all screwed up. I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So they
don't want
nice to see.
Life.
Right. Yeah.
Like Jane wants to be the normal one.
And she's like, because I have, I have true love.
Right.
What else could be wrong? I mean, there's everything
else.
What's
wrong with that? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So Cliff eventually gets out of the cell, and that kind of leads us to our second topic that I want to talk about. So the second topic is Can't Get There From Here, which is another song title.
Okay.
I'll leave that there. And I want to talk about, obviously, I want to talk about Penny Farthing, because Penny Farthing interacts both with Cliff and Jane here. Obviously is the one that leads Cliff around through Jane's underground, and also tries to talk to Jane in these very intriguing scenes by this very scenic lake, pond, whatever. And it's a very, very peaceful spot that Penny loves to go to. She says it's her favorite memory in the underground. And I want to get your thoughts on Penny interacting with both Cliff and Jane in the story.
I love that Penny doesn't stutter, except
stammer.
when she's stammer.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very cool.
She talks about it like that was her anxiety,
right?
That brings that out.
And you had mentioned several episodes ago that the puzzle pieces would all come clear.
Yes.
You at least assumed there would be a payoff.
Right.
And there was.
Right.
A pretty good payoff. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we talk about Daddy later in my next topic. So
so it was I really liked spending time with Penny. And
now Penny kind of takes Cliff around.
Yes.
And through the memories. Essentially, after Cliff, breaks through the wall in that cell, smashing and finally getting through that, he sees like this memory of Jane and thinks it's Jane. He tries immediately trying to apologize to her.
Mm-hmm.
And then Penny shows up and is like, nope, that's a memory.
Nope. Yeah.
That's not really Jane. It is, but it isn't. And so Cliff knows Penny from interacting with her. So even though she's probably not his favorite personality, he at least tolerates her. And she's the one that kind of escorts him around. To kind of do a shortcut, she cuts through various memories. One of them is like this, either like elementary school or junior high, something like that, where we're introduced to Miranda. And Miranda, as you know, as it is in the comics, was essentially the previous primary personality before Jane.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, as we're told, that Miranda essentially couldn't cope being the primary and essentially destroyed herself in what's known as the well.
Yes.
And because of that, her station was completely destroyed. And so when they have to go through it, though, and so when Penny Farthing takes Cliff through Miranda's station, she makes him cover his eyes, like, because it will just completely destroy his mind, because it's so horrific.
Yeah.
And when they start going through there, it's this big blinding light, and we see Miranda just yelling, "Shut the door!"
Right.
And just all terrified. And they go through that. Cliff kind of glimpses some bodies that are hanging up, and they're mutilated, and it's just this very morbid scene as they pass through. So we see that Miranda had a station, and so that means because each personality is its own station in the underground subway.
Yeah.
And they're all connected by the train and whatnot. And they get through that, and that ultimately leads Cliff to Jane.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can talk. So what did you kind of think of the Miranda personality? Revelation.
It was not very clear at first what it was.
Maybe it would seem that way more on a second viewing, maybe.
Yeah, because my first thought is not that Miranda was a previous prime, main, but this was actually the ultimate first personality.
Yes.
The K personality, the true Jane's original self is what at first I thought Miranda was.
Right.
And because
that was kind of like her first major alternate personality.
Yeah, because and then you get that after she says, "My name is Miranda. My name is Miranda,"
Right.
And you could tell that Miranda was a persona. This in a healthy way. I've seen this before. I have done my share of telemarketing back when I was younger,
mm-hmm.
and often people would pick up a different name. They would say, "I'm Rob," so that way the people being rude to him and hanging the phone, they were doing it to Rob, not
not
John.
them.
Yeah,
they could do. Yeah, exactly. So they wouldn't take it personally.
Yeah, and it was just kind of a trick they did to themselves, and so this was truly them, Kay trying to protect herself by putting on this Miranda. It's a very disturbing story, and I really thought they handled, once I understood that Miranda was going away, and why this happened, I thought they did a really good job of showing the damage that this, I guess,
trauma.
Kay, this person has gone through in all the different ways.
They mentioned that Kay essentially hasn't existed, or didn't exist, stopped existing as a young child.
Yeah.
And it's only that obviously the trauma happened, her personalities fragmented into 64 different personalities eventually.
Yeah.
And there's just she's essentially broken.
Yes.
that shattered really into all these pieces. and then it just so happens that all the pieces kind of they have this very tenuous coexistence with one another down
Absolutely.
there in the underground. Now Penny also tries to counsel Jane a little bit. Jane's trying to hide out. She comes across Jane hiding out in Penny's favorite spot, this lake area,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very peaceful scene. But Penny talks about like, hey, did you know someone pulled the emergency brake? And Jane's
Yeah.
acting all innocent, like, whoa, hey, weird,
Really?
right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that she talks about the others are saying that Jane doesn't want to go back up and be the primary anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane's kind of asking Penny, interesting. She's like, well, like what, she talks about like, what happens when you're spiraling out of control?
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of get the insight that Jane just feels like completely lost right now.
Yes.
And Penny says, well, like when I feel like that, I come here.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane says, well, what happens when that doesn't work anymore? So apparently Jane's still feeling like even though she's here, she still can't find peace.
Absolutely.
And so this is probably why she's close to essentially doing what Miranda did, and why the sisters, this kind of a more manipulative personality, essentially are trying to steer her toward destruction in the well. And Penny's trying to save Jane from that. When they confront Jane, she's like, Penny goes, don't do this. They're just trying to mess with you. That they're horrible. You don't want to listen to them.
Yeah, and it's very
So
sad.
what did you think of Penny trying to save Jane from her destroying herself?
Well, as I talked about earlier, it was nice to see not all of Jane's personalities are against her.
Right.
Some of them are
harmful, some
on
of them are
her side. They understand that they're in this together. Others are they just want the chaos.
Yes.
They don't care.
So essentially, like Jane has these just what's essentially a self-destructive side to her.
Yes.
And then she has another side that's trying to going, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
again, more conflict going on within Jane's brain. And this is going on all the time.
Yeah, I mean, she's
always feeling this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so so that's why, she lashes out sometimes she's all sweet and whatnot. And just because there's all these different sides of her battling one another.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. All right. Third and final topic. This is the big one.
Okay.
Everybody hurts sometimes.
A little REM theme.
Yes. Essentially this was an REM theme. So we had the song Driver 8 in topic 1, the song I Can't Get There From Here in topic 2, and Everybody Hurts. Mm-hmm. So this is a very REM themed, obviously because of the song Driver 8. Again, this is the song Driver 8. That was what Morrison named the Driver 8 persona after. Mm-hmm. He's a big REM fan. He used that in his Animal Man comic that he wrote, and with Superman, REM Superman song, and it just seemed very, very appropriate for this. So,
Good.
So Everybody Hurts. I want to talk about Black Annis, who's again another big personality I've been waiting to see. And, of course, Daddy, or at least Jane's Kay's memory of Daddy, and who's this very, demonic, horrific monster inside her head that just, just is lurking out of the well. And so we have Jane coming to the well, ready to destroy herself, and Cliff shows up, tries to help her as they battle Daddy in this big climactic scene. So what did you think about that whole thing?
It's a disturbing story.
Right.
And, you know it's a disturbing story when you see her at the jigsaw puzzle and trying to
Yes.
play, and you hear him say, "We have to hurry before Mom comes home."
Right.
Mommy comes home. You're like, oh.
Yes. You get it. You feel like I need a shower to get this
Yes.
filth off of me.
Right.
Yes. And
Um.
it is unsettling, and it's supposed to be. It's not. You're not supposed to be happy about this. This
Yeah.
is horrific, and it's obviously explains why Jane is the way she is.
Mhm.
And it's basically kind of without showing it, it's laid out right here.
Yeah.
That the whole thing with the puzzles is essentially Kay's last moment. This is and it's the when Jane actually sees the young Kay, and
Mhm.
she makes this comment. This is where it began, wasn't it?
So
And so it's this moment where like Jane, or excuse me, young Kay is essentially like you said, trying to complete her puzzle. She tells her dad, like, look, I'm not finished with my puzzle.
mhm.
And this is essentially the loss of her innocence here, as her father takes her away.
Do you? So the feeling is that this is
To do horrible things to her.
do you feel like this is the first time he did that, or was it just one of the? It was the straw that broke the camel's back.
I kind of view it as the because I would think the first time would be the most traumatic.
Yeah.
So
But
I would,
the way you said though that K
yeah,
ended, so
yeah,
do you think that was just one? And I'm not belittling the one time. I'm just
yeah,
saying
right.
that
I
was
don't,
it was
I
enough
don't
that
think it was, I don't think it was just the one time that happened.
yeah, I don't
But
either.
I think this is the first time it happened,
And that's when
and that's when Kay was essentially she ended,
yeah.
and probably Miranda and her personality split after this
Yeah.
as a way to cope from the trauma of
Mhm.
what happened that first time. I think
Yeah.
is that that Jane, or well, Kay, her personalities split, fragmented,
Yeah.
and as a way to cope with all that, as a
Okay.
coping mechanism.
Makes sense.
Because it disassociated,
Mhm.
and that it's just she was so shattered by this horrific moment.
Yeah.
Like, hey, my father molested me,
Right.
and as someone who's very close to someone who had that happen,
Yeah.
it's obviously very powerful for me to see this horrible concept. But it's also a great moment when at the end of the episode, Jane stands up to Daddy and tells him off, and it's a
That
good moment for
is
her.
that is a great moment, but then it it brings back when she still hears his voice
Right.
because
He's not gone. It's
it's not that simple and it's not that easy
no, it's not. It's
to destroy those demons.
right. Exactly. It's just
Yeah.
he managed. She managed to fend him off long enough to save Cliff, get him out of there,
Yes.
and bring herself back from the brink, essentially, at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It was just, yeah, very big. Oh, and did you notice that the puzzle that Kay was putting together was
Was the
the scenic pond scene?
yes, they did. I thought they did a good job of showing that, of tying it together
So
that
because Jane couldn't remember, like, okay, well, whose memory is
yeah,
this? And which makes sense because Jane isn't Kay; it's Kay's
right.
memory.
Yes.
And
And
so it's the last time that she had peace before this horrific
exactly.
moment.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
it's another big punch in the gut as you're watching this story.
Absolutely.
And so Cliff obviously has to, before he gets in there to help to try to bring Jane back from going in the well and destroying herself, he has to get past Black Annis.
Yeah.
And Black Annis is essentially the this final guard to make sure nobody gets to this very deep part of her mind.
Mm-hmm.
This Penny earlier had mentioned that like as deeper as you go, the memories get darker and more dangerous, and so essentially you're descending into
Yeah.
hell here. And so this is essentially as you reach the bottom, Black Annis is that last a guardian
Mm-hmm.
there, and Black Annis, sees Cliff as a human, as a male, and decides, well, you can't pass, and she attacks him
Yeah.
and slashes his face, and in this kind of very cool moment, like Cliff looks up and you see his robot man eye where his human eye used to be.
Yeah.
So you realize that the human look was just a shell over his true robot man self. So what did you think of that?
So I liked that scene a lot. As I mentioned, I thought that was very cathartic for Cliff to be able to embrace that he's not a man
Right,
anymore.
right.
Though
And uses that to get past Black Annis.
I would argue that I think he's actually finding, while he may not be a man, he's continuing to find his humanity,
Right.
which is a good thing. I I liked that. I liked it a lot. Now um I wasn't as impressed with that persona. I mean, I
Right.
got that they were the protector and trying to
Right.
do why did you want to see that persona so much? What
Well,
about it did you were so impressed with it from the comic?
well, in the comic, it's much more visually interesting.
Okay.
Um, Jane externalizes Black Annis. Like
Okay.
how Jane physically became Karen or
Yeah.
physically becomes Hammerhead.
Right.
Jane physically becomes Black Annis in the comic when there's
Okay.
a major threat to Jane
Okay.
and lashes out this angry personality. So it was just kind of like one of the more important personalities.
Okay. Got it.
And I hadn't seen that character. Now, obviously, Jane hasn't externalized her yet on the show,
Right.
but we kind of see how she is here inside Jane's head.
Got it.
And so that maybe eventually when we do see her externalize that persona, it's going to be very, very visually powerful
Got it.
whenever that personality manifests physically in the real world.
Okay.
So we'll see. So I think it's just something that, like if it's a major personality from the comics, and I was just kind of like glad to see it represented finally here.
Cool. Okay.
On the
Makes
show. On the
sense.
show. But yeah, not much of a very important role, but it kind of like a good moment with Cliff
Okay.
as he realizes that, hey, to get through here, I have to be Robot Man, essentially.
Okay. Good.
And just I love the fact that he's there for Jane, talking her down and saying, look, I need you. Like I'm here for you. You don't need to destroy yourself. And that they face Daddy together, but then Cliff ends up getting captured by like Daddy grabs him and then bites him in half. And that's the moment that Jane snaps out of it.
Yeah, and
she's like, she lashes out so angrily. She's like, "You destroy everything."
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let you destroy him because obviously she cares about him.
And I like the idea that
I hate you. She finally says to her father, "I hate you."
Yeah, and I like the idea that Jane saved herself. She did not need big brother or
Cliff.
father figure Cliff to take care of it. She did this herself, and I was really I thought that was an important thing, not just for the story, but for the character, that she should be able to do this herself.
It's an important moment for her, yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it may not be the big breakthrough that Jane needs to kind of be whole, but it is enough of a breakthrough to snap her out of her catatonic state.
Absolutely.
And bring her back. So Cliff and Jane return, and they return to the surface. The negative spirit returns to Larry, and then Cliff wakes up and sees some like lab equipment smashed on the floor. We don't know why. What the deal is with that?
So I
So
was.
what do you think with that? Because I think that's a tease for another story coming up.
So I was a little surprised when I watched the previews for next week.
Right.
Because I assumed next week episode would be everything that happened while Cliff was in
With Jane.
Jane.
Yeah, the
and
underground.
It doesn't look like they're paying that off, or maybe they're just teasing us with the promos, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I assumed was going to be immediately.
I thought so too. So I'm kind of, like Cliff's like, what's the deal here? And Rita and Vic both say in unison, long story.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the story with that? I think that's something we'll find out later. Maybe Mr. Nobody had showed up or something. Who knows?
Okay.
We'll find out, hopefully. And then Vic asks Cliff what happened in there. Mm-hmm. And Cliff's like, it's not my story.
Yeah. Which I thought was well done.
But the good thing is that Jane's back, and Cliff thinks she's better, but then we get the little nod that you mentioned that Jane goes back to her room, and we realize, like, he's still there. He's still in her head.
Yes. And
he's not gone. Mm-hmm. So rather disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But important. So obviously this was a big episode.
It was.
And do you feel like you know Jane a little better after watching this episode?
I do. I very much think that.
More sympathetic for Jane?
Well, I always was sympathetic for Jane, so I don't think more sympathetic. I think I have more understanding of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I've always...
Do you understand why I thought this would be a very important story?
Yes, and I agree it is. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's and I definitely recommend reading the comic. If you really enjoyed this one, you should read Doom Patrol Volume 2, number 30 from 1990. I definitely recommend it. Going Underground. Check it out.
And you said it's one of your favorite comics of all time.
Yes, it is one of my all-time favorite comics.
Good.
So
okay.
It's only one issue. It's a perfect one-issue story, and highly recommended.
Very nice. Cool.
Very cool. All right. So do you have any favorite lines of the episode?
I do not. I was paying a lot of attention to the story itself, but I knew you would do my heavy lifting as always.
All right. I see how it is. Okay. That's all right. I don't mind doing my fair share here. All right. Favorite lines early on, Cliff and Rita talking, where Cliff's blaming himself. He goes, "This is all my fault. I never should have pushed us into therapy." And Rita goes, "Well, don't flatter yourself, Cliff. Therapy was the rat's idea."
Yeah, I like that a lot because Cliff is taking himself a little too serious.
Yeah.
And kind of blaming himself like, it's all my fault. And just her popping his balloon was really well done.
Well, I think a lot of it stems from the fact that he feels guilty over what he did with his wife, cheating on his wife, and
absolutely,
and murdering her, and he thought murdering his daughter until he found out that she was still alive.
Right.
And
I don't know if I'd use murder.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean.
He accidentally killing him.
Accidentally. I don't think it was intentional. You're right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right about that. Unintentionally murdering.
Yes,
or unintentionally. It was manslaughtering, essentially.
Yes.
Unintentionally. I like the line between Vic and Larry. Before Larry's negative spirit comes out, Vic goes, "Part of me wishes that we could just shrink ourselves, magic school bus style, and get inside her head." And he kind of looks at the others who are staring at him going, "What?" And Larry says, "I'm just marveling at your embrace of the weird and utterly impossible."
And then, of course, what a payoff. Negative spirit go like, "Oh, you mean this?" That was
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, it just pops out of nowhere. So Magic School Bus, for those not familiar, is this kid show that it was an animated show, and like they would teach you stuff by like having this magic school bus that could go anywhere, even including inside people's brains or whatnot. So I think that's obviously where the reference comes from.
Yeah, I would have used the Isaac Asimov Fantastic Voyage, the old movie, where I think that's what I would have done. But yes, fair enough.
Yeah. There was a line between Penny Farthing and Jane where they're talking about Penny Farthing's trying to warn her about the sisters,
Mm-hmm.
and Penny Farthing goes, "They, she, whatever that thing is in there, it's nutters." And Jane goes, "Goodbye, Penny." And Penny responds, seriously? Was Russian roulette not an option?"
Yeah, that was a great line. I agree.
Yeah. And then, of course, the final, Cliff's last line in the episode, which I thought was really powerful. Vic goes in there, asks, "What happened in there?" And Cliff says, "That's not my story to tell."
Yes.
Because it's not. It's not his. It's
No,
Jane's.
it isn't.
If Jane wants people to know, Jane should tell the story.
Absolutely.
And it's good of Cliff to realize that and respect it.
I agree.
Very important. So Cliff's making some progress here too. He's, therapy. So yeah.
Yes, exactly.
He's doing good. So what's your rating for this one?
This was another good one. I've been so happy with this season and the story they're telling. I'm going to give it another 9. I'm going to give it, 9 out of 10 jigsaw pieces.
Yep.
I just think this is, I think they're telling the story they want to tell, and I'm enjoying the story a lot. I've never been, I know one of your concerns is it's not really moving the story,
right.
But I just don't think that's what they're trying to do right now.
No. And, this is, a really good story. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right. My rating, after everything I just talked about, you probably not much of a shock to find out that I'm giving this one the first 10 out of 10. I give it 10 out of 10 underground train cars.
I would have been disappointed if it wasn't a 10.
Yeah.
Because if this is, there is something beautiful about seeing one of your favorite stories and having it just nail it.
Right.
You're like, oh, this was just great. So yeah, good stuff.
They, obviously I was very nervous about watching this episode, but they, kudos to the writers and obviously to Diane Guerrero and we should also talk about that, the guy that plays Cliff. I'm blanking on his name. I can't believe this now. Brendan Fraser. Thank you. Yes, Brendan Fraser. Did a really good job. How great was it to see Brendan Fraser throughout the entire episode?
Yeah, and he's a really he's a good actor, and he's done a lot of different roles.
Right.
He's really done a great job on this.
Yeah,
I really think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like this character, he gets this character.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not like a performance to him. It flows very naturally, I think.
I agree.
Whether that's his skill as an actor or it's just that he identifies with him.
Yeah.
A lot.
I agree.
It's very good. And obviously, Brendan Fraser does a great job here. And, obviously, was it exactly like it was from the comic? No, but it had the exact tone it needed to have, and enough. The big final confrontation was there, which was, that was the deal breaker for me. If they had screwed that up, I would have been very upset about that. Absolutely. Because it's so important. And Marcus Dalzine, to his credit, nailed it in the script. So. Even though Penny Farthing's kind of substituted for Driver 8, the gist is here. It hits all the major points with me, and so I give it a 10. Absolutely. Good. Yeah, good job. So well done, Doom Patrol. My favorite episode of the series so far. Good. And hey, we have not a little casting news. Yes. Not minor casting news. We have casting news for Titan Talk. Exactly. This is a kind of a big one. Yeah, for Titan Season 2. And it's kind of very appropriate to talk about this on Game of Thrones Day. So happy Game of
Yes.
Thrones Day, everybody!
I'm wearing my cast of
Clash of Kings.
yeah, the
Oh, I
yeah,
can't see it
cast,
with your
yeah,
microphone in the way.
yeah, it is my cast.
There you go, a cast of kings. Yeah.
Yeah, the not the podcast I'm on, but one of my favorite uh
Game
podcasts,
of Thrones.
Game of Thrones podcast. Yeah, so
Yep.
yeah,
Very good.
I am excited.
Yeah, this is obviously we're very excited here in the Skaggs household, ready to watch Game of Thrones. The final season debuts tonight, so season 8. So can't wait.
Yes.
It's going to be good. So obviously this is not a Game of Thrones podcast, so we'll just kind of move on. But
Yes.
wanted to acknowledge that because we're going to talk Ian Glenn, who obviously you know from playing Ser Jorah Mormont on Game of Thrones. So that's kind of the connection I was going with here. Titan Season 2 has cast Ian Glenn as an older Bruce Wayne, which I think is really interesting. And so, Jesse, what do you think about this casting before I get into the nitty-gritty of it?
I loved it. I first off, this guy's a great actor.
Yeah,
he's done so much in Game of Thrones. And the other idea is to have an older Bruce Wayne that is and so interacting is just perfect. I don't know how much we're going to see him as Batman. Are we going to mostly see him?
I don't think so. I don't think we'll see him as
I
Batman.
think it was great, and I'm okay with that. I think that's actually a good choice.
He might look a little silly wearing the Batman costume.
Yeah, well, and we don't need that. We've had a Batman.
Right.
But to see a Bruce Wayne interacting with Jason Todd and Dick Grayson is just I want that a lot.
So we had talked about when we were reviewing Titans, we had talked about how frustrated we were because Bruce Wayne was either in the shadows or he was kind of blurred out in the background, not really directly talking with young Jason or young Dick Grayson. Right. Now we finally get to have that.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be so good.
That fixes one of the problems we had with Titan Season 1.
I agree.
And I think it's going to be a big step. And Glenn, first I should talk about, so this version of Bruce is described as, quote, after decades of fighting crime as Batman, billionaire Bruce Wayne is just as driven to protect Gotham from evil as he was in his prime. Needing to reconcile his relationship with Dick Grayson, the duo hopes to forge a new dynamic as Bruce tries to help his former sidekick and the Titans achieve success.
Nice.
So maybe Bruce is one of the reasons that, maybe once he gets past his being controlled by Trigon, that maybe he kind of helps Dick get the Titans up and running officially.
Yeah, I hope so.
Maybe he supports the Titans financially, gives them a headquarters or something, or at least realizes that maybe he's getting older and he kind of needs Dick to step up to the plate a little more. Whether he admits it or not, because it's Bruce, he probably won't admit it.
Yeah,
but maybe he'll hint that that's the case.
Yeah, perfect.
And so Glenn's 57, which kind of makes him the oldest actor to portray Bruce Wayne or Batman in live action. This is after Adam West, who last played the character in 2 Legends of Superhero specials at 50, and that was back in the 70s. And then Ben Affleck, who last appeared in Justice League at 44. And then Michael Keaton, who last played the character in Batman Returns at 40. So he's the oldest, or will be the oldest.
Nice.
And obviously, in addition to Game of Thrones, you probably know him because we talked about it. Well, maybe we haven't because we haven't reviewed these episodes on Next Stop Everywhere. But he's been on Doctor Who as a character named Father Octavian in the Matt Smith episodes, The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone.
That's right. He did.
In Doctor Who Series 5 from 2010. He's also been in various Resident Evil movies. He was in Kingdom of Heaven, The Iron Lady, Gorillas in the Mist, Kick-Ass 2, Lara Croft Tomb Raider, and My Cousin Rachel.
Can you turn
And
off
then he's
the
been
oven
on
for me,
in
LJ?
TV. He's been on Downton Abbey, Ripper Street, Law and Order UK, other shows. So
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, he's a great actor, and I think I'm really looking forward to see what he does as Bruce Wayne.
Yep, it should be good. So
Good.
we don't have any Tell It to Titan talk this week. Holly from Wisconsin apparently taking the week off. So Holly, hopefully you come back next week.
Yes.
I would love to know your thoughts on this episode. So
Absolutely.
hopefully you'll share those. But if not, no big deal. But I didn't get your email. So but if you want to be like Holly usually is and you want to reach us here at Titan Talk, you can reach us at titantalkcast@gmail.com. That's titantalkcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, you can reach us at Titan Talk Cast on Twitter or Titan Talk, the Titans Podcast on Facebook. We definitely appreciate that. And also, please go to iTunes, rate and review us. We would definitely appreciate that as well. And if you could like and follow us and share us with your people on the social media, that would be great.
Absolutely.
And Jesse, where can they reach you on the interwebs?
So I am available on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. I am also on Facebook at Jesse Jackson in Louisville, Texas. You can hear me talk Doctor Who, me or other guest hosts for our Charles and I's Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. And I am coming up this week. We will record our first review of the current season of Game of Thrones on Small Council Matters. That's on the Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV network. And of course,
please check that out.
Yes, I am finishing up my 40 days of Springsteen. This is the last week. We have a lot of guest hosts that are doing their moment, and then after Easter, we'll get back to our once-a-week episode just talking to fans. And Charles, how about you? Where can they hear your great work?
Well, I don't know about great, but you can hear my
very great.
Yeah, you can hear me. Well, first, actually, I should say that you can follow me on the Twitter machine at Charles Skaggs or on Instagram at Charles Skaggs or Facebook at Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio. Definitely appreciate that. Say hi. Other than that, you can reach me on my blog of geeky things. Get that button to work.
Damn good coffee and hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Titan Talk, including any calls, comic book, sci-fi casting news, including the Ian Glenn casting on Titans as Bruce Wayne recently. All kinds of news about, like I just recently posted about Disney Plus, their big announcement and all their shows coming up, and so check that out if you would. Also has news of my podcast that I do for Southgate Media, including the aforementioned Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, where Jesse and I are going to talk Dalek here in a couple weeks, and from the Christopher Eccleston era.
Absolutely.
But we've been talking. I had a lot of great guest hosts, including Christine Peruski and Zan Sprouse, who is my co-host on Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast that I do with her, where we talk about all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, etc., etc.
Yeah, and Christine is one of the members with me on the Small Council Matters.
Right.
So if you like Christine's visits on the Next Stop Everywhere, check her out. She is wonderful on Small Council.
Yeah, she always does a nice job on Next Stop Everywhere. So
yeah, she is. She is a really good.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun talking A Good Man Goes to War recently. So next time on Titan Talk, we are going to talk Hair Patrol. In episode 10, our two-thirds, as we hit the two-thirds mark, where Vic and Rita face a dangerous man called the Beard Hunter. And this is a very silly character that from Doom Patrol number 45 of Grant Morrison's run, that's essentially like a parody of the Punisher, and only taken to serious, silly, a silly take on it, because essentially this, instead of the Punisher hunting criminals, the Beard Hunter hunts men with beards and takes their beards as trophies. So apparently here the Beard Hunter has been activated by the Bureau of Normalcy to find Niles Calder.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens.
Nice.
And so maybe this will be the backstory that of revealing what happened to the lab equipment. We'll find out.
Okay. Very nice. I'm
Stay
looking
tuned.
forward to it. Yes.
So that's next week. So we'll see what happens. So if you want to brush up on the Beard Hunter, you probably should read Doom Patrol number 45.
Good.
Check that out. So otherwise, thanks to everybody for listening. And come on back. We're going to talk Hair Patrol next time. And we'll see you right here next time on Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. Goodbye, everybody.